you got up and went out or something before the sermon started.
Uh-huh.
And David stood up, he looked around, he looked over toward us, he said, "Ow." Where Daddy
You didn't
is.
know where I went.
He just shrugged his
Yeah,
shoulders.
yeah.
I just remembered it.
You remember?
And I didn't remember it until you mentioned it. And when I said, what are we doing? A thing, and I'm like, I'm filming this like class on the announcements and I said, can I come? And
That's right, you want to come.
I just remembered it.
That's right.
You said them.
That's right, we're here now, so let's get started. And before we do, would one of you all like to lead us in a prayer, and we'll get kicked off? Don't matter.
Go ahead, Joe.
Our God and our Father in heaven, we're so thankful for this opportunity we have together here this evening to study your word and learn how to become better servants for thee. Father, we're so thankful for your word and the guidance we can receive from it as far as doing your will. And we ask that you be with us and help us to have open hearts and minds that we might better understand your word and your will and be better servants for thee in all that we strive to do. It's in Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, brother. Okay, so actually on that note, what we're going to study tonight is prayer, actually. And what I'd like to do is throughout this class, try to have lots of involvement. So over time, I think it would be great if we could get to having a different man want to lead a certain topic. Not right away. I mean, I'll take the first several. But ultimately, I was talking with Ron this morning about videoing it, which I guess we're doing. But the goal really is for training and is for really getting more comfortable in things that maybe today we're not very comfortable with. I'll tell you right now, I'm not very comfortable with singing. I'm just not. I'm not that comfortable with it. But I know that at the end of the day, a mixed congregation of men and women, and if there's no one much around but me, I'm going to have to step up and figure out how to sing.
Right.
So I'd even like to step up as well in certain areas, such as singing. And I'm hoping over time the class will kind of evolve into kind of almost a mini devotional series, but where we're ultimately trying to remind each other as to what our role is as men. So this afternoon, what we're going to start at is prayer, and we're going to kick off by looking at 2 Timothy chapter 2. And this is kind of the root verse for this class as to why really this matters and why this is of significance. 2 Timothy chapter 2 and verse 2. If you don't have a Bible now, don't worry about it. I'm going to read it out loud. It says, "In these things that thou hast heard of me among many witnesses," so this is Paul writing to Timothy, "the same commit thou to faithful men who shall be able to teach others also." You know, we're I think very comfortable in this country and in this society where we have congregations all throughout this country. We have preaching schools all throughout this country. But there are some places, even in this country, where there are not capable men available to speak. And so just like that instance I mentioned just a few minutes ago about having to maybe step up to lead singing, who knows? You might end up either moving or visiting a congregation one day, and they might just pull you over and say, "Hey, we're going to need you to help us out here." Y'all, brethren, may have been in those kind of situations before.
Yeah, I have.
Yeah, you have? Okay. Yeah, here in this country?
Yeah, that small congregation we came from.
Oh, really?
They wasn't but probably 30 men
Wow.
in it, and basically had to do it all.
Sure.
Yeah.
So did y'all do the preaching as well? Did
No,
somebody-
we didn't. We had somebody.
You had somebody do the preaching. Okay.
Yeah, if I had done the preaching, it'd have folded a lot quicker.
My oldest son-in-law for a long time in mission work, sort of, I guess you could call it mission work in New York. It was him and one man in a congregation of about 6 or 7 women.
Wow.
And there wasn't nothing for him to have to preach. you know,
Wow.
wait on the table, lead singing and
The whole
the
thing.
whole thing.
Yeah. And that was
Yeah, it's places here that's
sure.
the same way.
And that was in New York City,
Well, it wasn't the city, it was upper state New
but
York.
over that way.
That's
Once you get
Right.
below Atlanta, it's pretty dry down there as far as churches are concerned, and they're most of them are pretty small. And, you end up having to
Sure. Right,
carry a lot of the load.
right.
When you was overseas not long ago, there was a couple of Sundays there, I said, Lord, don't help, hope somebody shows up to lead singing.
Right.
I got worried.
Right.
It was slim there for a couple of weeks.
Sure.
Ron was sick, Roger was sick,
Yeah.
Chad was sick, I think. I done got worried.
Well, and the thing of it is it's a great honor to be able to do it. I mean, that's the thing. And I know, you know, we get nervous about things and we get comfortable and, you know, that's natural. I mean, that's completely normal. But right here, right away, you're seeing that God is entrusting this into faithful men. So right there, God says there's a certain qualification that has to be met. I think Hank has mentioned before, in these kinds of discussions, maybe broader, but basically, you know, you don't want just anybody up there teaching.
Right.
And you know, the Lord is more concerned about the faithfulness of someone than someone's ability. I mean, and sometimes congregation get themselves in binds. We don't have this issue at all, but I've been to congregations where it's like, well, that person can speak well, but they're not faithful. They hardly ever maybe attend, they hardly ever, you know, do much, and congregations, elderships will just push them on up there. Well, that person may be comfortable getting up there, but you don't have a clue what they're gonna say, and, you know, they're not really qualified. But then sometimes we have faithful men who maybe aren't very comfortable speaking, they maybe just aren't comfortable leading a prayer, leading singing, but, you know, they're faithful. And really, I mean, at the end of the day, you know, that's the requirement that God gives us. He doesn't say you gotta be an eloquent speaker, or, you know, this or that, or, you know, have a great voice to lead singing. I mean, so, yeah, go ahead if somebody's got a comment.
Well, we put way too much emphasis on the quality rather than the message,
Right.
you know. I mean, I know we've got songbooks down, most people don't like to make mistakes, and, so what if you make a mistake?
Right.
You know, just keep on going, you stop, let your congregation carry it, and you just
Right.
pick up. But in the same thing with the Bible, you know, I mean, if you're talking about God's word, then it's not how good you are at speaking, or not necessarily how knowledgeable you are.
Right.
You know, because between you and I, you're so far ahead of me in knowledge. You know, if I would compare myself to you in a pulpit, well, I would never get up there, because I know, you know, I don't have that knowledge, and but yet still, I don't mind doing it, because I know what I'm gonna say, and I know what I do say is gonna be from God's word.
Sure, absolutely, absolutely. And really the words that we find in the scripture regarding eloquence, there's not very many times it aligns with someone who is faithful at the same time, which really, if nothing else, tells us that eloquence can be a hindrance rather than an aid. Let's look at a couple examples of that. So let's go to the book of Acts, and let's look at 18. And you see here in verse 24, it says, "And a certain Jew named Apollos, born at Alexandria, an eloquent man and mighty in the scriptures, came to Ephesus." Verse 25, "This man was instructed in the way of the Lord, and being fervent in the Spirit, he spake and taught diligently the things of the Lord, knowing only the baptism of John. And he began to speak boldly in the synagogue, whom when Aquila and Priscilla had heard, they took him unto them, and expounded unto him the way of God more perfectly." So here you see an example of someone who is eloquent and is bold in the scriptures. So right off the bat, if you were hearing, Apollos speaking, you might think, well, this person surely must be preaching the truth and teaching the truth, but he needed to be corrected. You have the example of Herod as well in Acts chapter 12, who was a great speaker and orator. Acts chapter 12, starting there in verse 20, it says, "And Herod was highly displeased with them of Tyre and Sidon, But they came with one accord to him, and having made Blastus the king's chamberlain their friend, desired peace, because their country was nourished by the king's country. And upon a set day, Herod, arrayed in royal apparel, sat upon his throne and made an oration unto them. And the people gave a shout, saying, It is the voice of a God, and not of a man. And immediately the angel of the Lord smote him, because he gave not God the glory, and he was eaten of worms and gave up the ghost. So, we place these constraints on ourselves because physically we think, well, you got to sound a certain way, and you got to, this and that. I'm going to tell you, I think some of the best preachers that we have in the brotherhood are men who don't speak that, appealingly. And I'm not going to name any names, but there's some brethren who know so much Scripture and have a way of connecting the dots and really expounding unto the assembly what God's Word says. And, they may not be very good speakers, but it doesn't matter. And the same goes for prayer, the same goes for singing, etc. So to circle back on this idea of it being an honor, here's what Paul says regarding his ability to be able to minister and to serve in this leadership way. In Ephesians chapter 3, he says here in verse 7, Wherefore I was made a minister according to the gift of the grace of God given unto me by the effectual working of his power. Unto me, who am less than the least of all saints, is this grace given, that I should preach among the Gentiles the unsearchable riches of Christ, and to make all men see what is the fellowship of the mystery, which from the beginning of the world hath been hidden God, who created all things by Jesus Christ. So Paul says, it is by God's graciousness that I even get to teach. It is by his graciousness that I even get to preach. Now, I understand, again, if I were to be asked, hey, can you lead singing for the congregation? I mean, believe me, that would be something I would, be willing to do, but I would be putting the brakes on in my mind. But the reality is, what we're being laid out here by God is a gracious blessing to be able to do these kinds of things. And it is only those who are faithful who can do those kinds of things. So let's take that into mind as we think about prayer. So let's start with prayer tonight. And let's begin by going to 1 Timothy chapter 2. 1 Timothy chapter 2. And let's look there at verse 8. If someone can read verse 8, George, I think you might be the only one. Or I guess we got some phones open.
I got my Bible right back there.
Okay.
You gonna read
Oh,
for me?
you can if you'd like.
Yeah, let me go.
Yeah, okay.
I'll be
we'll
right
wait
back.
just a second.
While I was waiting on him,
Yeah.
I heard supposedly very educated preachers get up and preach. And when they got through, I turned to Carol, I said, what did they say?
Right.
I mean, it's so far over my head
I know.
and I used to call them eight-cylinder words. I mean,
Right. I know.
very few people know the meaning of those words. Really.
Right.
And you're not doing justice when you get up there and do that either.
Correct.
So you can be from one end to the other end.
Correct. Well, y'all have probably heard these kinds of sayings before, but here's the agriculture kind of basis for a lot of what used to be preached. But a lot of my instructors said if you put it where the calves can eat it, the bulls and the heifers can eat it too. But if you put it up there where only the heifers and the bulls can eat it, the calves can't reach it. And so, as a preacher, teacher, whatever it is, we're trying to do it in a way that will reach even the lowest of intelligence. And yeah, you're right. I've been to those I've been to lectureships like that, and I've turned to I didn't turn actually. Clifton Angel, y'all met him. He was in front of me. He turned around, and his eyes just went like this. I mean, but the brother was speaking, and I mean, literally, you walk away. I don't have a clue what he just said. Yeah, so you're right.
It's like speaking in unknown tongue.
Right. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
speaking to themselves kind of.
Yeah.
So let's read 1 Timothy chapter 2 and verse 8.
Therefore I desire that men pray everywhere, lifting up holy hands without wrath and doubting.
Okay, so in verse 9, he then goes on to women. And in chapter 3, in verse 15, he talks about the way in which one is to behave in the house of God, which is the church of the living God. So clearly this passage and this context is regarding the way in which services are to be conducted amongst the congregation. And men have the responsibility to pray. And I think that we have a lot of men who do step up to pray. I think we can get more, and I think over time we will. Of course, I'm sure you're just like me, wishing that we had a better turnout tonight, but maybe it will get better. But the reality is, women just aren't authorized to stand up and pray. And it's hard because we have some women in our congregation, and there are women all over congregations throughout the world who, if God did authorize women to get up to pray, they would be first in line and willing to do it.
Yeah.
First in line. And, maybe that's just because, they're women and that's the way they are, or maybe it's because maybe they have a little bit more courage than we do sometimes. I don't know what it is, but ultimately, God hasn't laid that responsibility at the feet of women. It's been laid at the feet of men. And so one of the things that even when we were kind of brainstorming regarding this class that we talked about is, sometimes if you've never prayed before, you can be real uncomfortable in front of an assembly. What am I going to say? I don't remember specifically the instance, but I certainly remember when I started praying, and I remember even needing some correction on some things. Brethren would kind of pull me aside and say, hey, this and that and the other. And so it could be real nerve-wracking. But two things that we're going to take away tonight. Number one, we can write it down. We can write it down. I know of several men here even tonight that I've seen before take the bulletin up when they go pray. If you're questioning maybe, I don't know really what to pray and I'm not sure what to mention, we have that bulletin that has prayer requests. And that's a go-to list of folks that we can always refer to that the congregation is already thinking about. And that those members themselves are concerned. So that's one way, is to prepare ahead of time, either by the bulletin or by writing it down. And some of you may want to speak to this. Maybe you've done something like this before. You've kind of just gone and written down your prayers ahead of time.
I have. When I first started praying in the church in Greenwood, they would put out a bulletin, and your name would be on there a week before.
Okay.
And if I had a prayer, I'd write it.
Sure.
And I basically memorized it.
Right.
But I would take my note up there with me in my
Right.
Bible, and I'd open it up and I'd pray.
Right.
I didn't see anything wrong with it.
Well, there's Jesus talks how to pray
Exactly.
in the Lord's Prayer.
Right.
All of the Lord's Prayer. He was teaching
The
his
model
servants
prayer.
how.
Sure. Right.
And if you analyze that prayer, it's broken down into topics.
Correct.
And those topics can be summarized in a little acronym that I always use, called ACTS.
Okay, that was our point number 2. Yeah, go ahead. That's good.
You already know ACTS?
Yeah, but go ahead though. That's where we're gonna go.
Adoration, confession, thanksgiving, and supplication.
Right.
And I always write that. If I'm asked to do the prayer, I write that down.
Sure.
Acts. And I may not cover every topic as completely as I'd like to, or as somebody else might like me to, but at least I try to hit each topic in the prayer and get through that. And it seems like if you break the prayer down into those topics and you keep them separate, you can keep your mind focused.
Yes.
And you're not skipping around.
Correct.
You open up with adoration, confess your sins and ask for forgiveness. You give thanksgiving for what you've got, and you pray for what you need. The congregation needs to pray for the sick.
Correct. Let's actually go ahead and go there. And any other points about writing it down beforehand? Because those were the two takeaways today.
That's a good, see, I don't know, I didn't know that, I didn't, know that you could break it down like that.
Yeah.
So
I mean, you
that's
don't have
already
to. It's
helped
just
me.
it's just a helpful way to do it,
Yeah.
So,
So I was taught this acronym when I was teaching a teenage age class for boys. There's 2 boys. There's only 2 boys. It's in Durham, and prayer was one of the first, and that was the acronym. And it's interesting because if you look, and we're going to go there now. Let's go to Matthew 6. And if someone can read for me, let's just read 9 through 13. Matthew chapter 6, 9 through 13.
After this manner therefore pray ye, Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen.
Okay, so that acronym is ACTS, so ACTS. And just to kind of follow up with what Ron was basically saying, look there at verse 9. Our Father which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. I mean, so there's an adoration being declared there to God. There is a reverence that's being acknowledged regarding his power and his greatness. I've heard brethren before, and that's almost their whole prayer. And sometimes I wonder if we'd be better served that way. You think about Job and all the issues that they had, the friends and Job and their discussion. When that conversation and discourse got done and God entered the picture, what did God start talking about? I mean, he didn't start answering all their little quibbles and questions. All God started talking about was, look who made all these things. And he just goes off and lists all the details of his creation. And, look at how I did this and look at how I did that. And sometimes when we're so burdened, the congregation even is maybe even in, I don't want to call it a rut, but sometimes we do go through the motions in our prayers, or we're not really thinking about what it is we say. Sometimes maybe we can just slow down, and we could just focus more on this adoration part, and just really praising God and mentioning his creation and the blessings of life and health, et cetera, et cetera. And there's a lot that can be said there. A lot that can be said. So yeah, that's absolutely one of them. Let's go to another passage as well. Let's go to Philippians chapter 4. Philippians chapter 4. And if someone could read for me here, let's just read verse 6.
Let your moderation be known unto all men. The Lord is at hand. Is that right, Bert?
That's okay. Can you read the next one too? That's
Be
fine.
careful for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known unto God.
Okay, so there you see, an emphasis on these other points. I mean, requests is as confession regarding sin. We're told in several places regarding the need to confess our sin. Let's start with 1 John chapter 1, verse 9. If someone can read that for me, verse 9 of 1 John chapter 1.
If we confess our sins, he is faithful and just to forgive us our sins and to cleanse us from all unrighteousness.
Okay, and I mean, Murphy was even asking me tonight on the way over here, what happens after you get baptized and you sin? You have to get rebaptized? And I was kind of laughing and chuckling, but really, adults ask that same question.
Yes.
And we were talking a little bit about this chapter, and right there we're being told that confession is something that God expects out of us if we want to be forgiven. And in James chapter 5, verse 16, James chapter 5 and verse 16, if someone wants to read for me verses 15 and 16. James chapter 5, 15 and 16.
And the prayer of faith will save the sick, and the Lord will raise him up. And if he has committed sins, he will be forgiven. Confess your trespasses to one another, and pray for one another, that you may be healed. The effective, fervent prayer of a righteous man avails much.
So again, we're seeing the emphasis on faithfulness, seeing the emphasis on one who is diligent and righteous. And we also see supplications being mentioned here, but so is confession and confessing our sins. let's look also back to Philippians 4 and notice here the T, which is thanksgiving. We are to be careful for nothing, verse 6 of Philippians 4, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, letting our requests be made known unto God. Now, sometimes folks will say, well, you know, not only being thankful for what God's done, but being thankful even for the very prayer. And being thankful for the very ability to pray. And for all the many answered prayers that He has answered. So there's a lot that we could say regarding thanksgiving. And supplication is also mentioned there. So what is supplication?
Prayer request,
Yeah.
petitioning God for what you need in prayer.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. In the model prayer, our daily bread, supplication also can tend to lean sometimes on the sick and on those who are in need of healing, kind of like we saw back over there in James 5. The request that others can find comfort. Now, you think about these 4 topics, if you're going to use this acronym. We could probably spend, 2 hours writing down things that is worthy of adoration toward God. Just that. And then 2 more hours writing down areas of sins that we can confess. Then areas of thanksgiving that we need to mention and emphasize. And then, of course, supplications. I mean, we have all kinds of folks on our prayer list who are battling with illness and with sickness. And so, absolutely, that acronym is a great one. And if we're not able to prepare beforehand, or we're not able to grab a bulletin, or we're being asked, that's an acronym that we can remember that should help us kind of organize our prayers. Any comments on that? Any thoughts?
Well, one thing I do, I don't know, the rest of you may do it too, but if I know I'm gonna, like, if I got opening prayer, before I go up there, I say a short prayer to God to help me
Right.
say the right thing.
Right.
I always do that. I don't know if other people do it or not. But I ask for His help to recall the things that need to be said.
Sure. And when we look at James chapter 5, 15 and 16, we look at 2 Timothy 2 and verse 2, the emphasis on faithful, the emphasis on righteous, the emphasis on fervent. That is that we ourselves are diligent in approaching God individually. And as we are seeking to approach God individually, we then are also taking the responsibility to approach God, leading the congregation in doing so. So that's a great point, because sometimes, I'm right there with you, and I've never really talked this out with anyone before, but I'm sure it's possible to do, and I know of cases where this has been done. But folks will look at the work of the church and leadership within a congregation in the way in which someone might view something secularly. So just like I would be maybe, making a hot dog, I'm just going to go up there and say a prayer. In other words, not much thought maybe is given to it, and not much, reverence and acknowledgement of God and of the fact that we are approaching His throne. And on that note, think about this for a second, George, to that point, just that attitude, if nothing else. Look at what Isaiah states. Let's go to Isaiah chapter 6. Isaiah chapter 6, and if someone can read for me there verses 5 through 7. Now, think about what Isaiah is about to do. His job as being a prophet. Think about that, and then look at what he states and what happens here. Isaiah chapter 6, verses 5. Let's go to chapter 6, verses 5 through 7.
Then said I, Woe is me, for I am undone, because I am a man of unclean lips, and dwell in the midst of a people of unclean lips. For mine eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts. Then flew one of the seraphims unto me, having a live coal in his hand, which he had taken with the tongs from off the altar. And he laid it upon my mouth, and said, Lo, this hath touched thy lips, and thine iniquity is taken away, and thy sin purged.
Okay, so Isaiah is aware of his responsibility and is really aware of his state in view of God. And we'll flesh this out more throughout this class, but I suppose it could be brought up here. Here's maybe a good place. Sometimes folks say, well, I feel hypocritical to lead a congregation. I feel like I'm not qualified or capable because I know that I've done things in my life before that I shouldn't have done, and who am I to get up there? Well, folks, that's understandable. But in reality, who other than Jesus couldn't say that?
Yeah, that's true. Nobody could lead prayer if that's true.
That's absolutely the case, right? Look at Paul. Look at Paul. Paul's a great example, right? Paul is a great example. Here Isaiah is basically saying, whoa, I'm unclean. He doesn't see it as being possible. So George, I don't know if that's what it is in regards to your mind. I know in my mind, part of it is, why am I doing this? Who is it ultimately for? Is it for me, or is it for God? And that can work in both ways. It can work both if we're scared and don't want to do it, and then we're reminded, hey, this isn't about me, it's about God. Or it can work if we're, hey, I'm ready to go up there and do it. Well, that might humble us down a little bit and say, wait a second, this isn't about me.
To me, you always got to remember, you in the presence of God. When we up there leading on Sunday morning, you in the presence of God. You're talking to God for the congregation through your leading prayer.
The same thing with singing too, right? Who are we singing to?
Whatever.
Singing, we're praising God, but in the process, we're teaching and admonishing one another. Yes, and that kind of attitude is one that can embolden us and also humble us.
It can be scary.
Right.
If you just really stop and think about it.
Right.
To me, it is.
No, it is. And James chapter 3, what are we told? Verse 1. My brethren, be not many masters, knowing that we shall receive the greater condemnation. And so, I'm sure, the elders especially, and the elders in general struggle with this. It's like, we need leaders, and we need teachers, and we need folks that are willing to preach, and we need folks. But at the same time, it's not just for anybody, and that's a hard balance. And at the end of the day, you can't, blurry the line and just say, well, anybody can do it. But at the same time, folks need to be encouraged that they can do it. So there's that balance. There's that balance of courage, while at the same time humility, recognizing ultimately the responsibility of what it is we're doing. Any other comments or thoughts on this topic of prayer? Go ahead, Merle.
Back several years ago, when I was just a young boy, we had a preacher there. He presented a training class on prayer and so forth. I remember several things. He more or less made it an example of a body of a letter, opening, greeting, and so forth, and down to salutation and so forth of prayer, which is pretty well the same thing you're talking about here.
Sure.
Going through the prayer, if you can remember what your, of course, your opening prayer, and greeting and so forth, and the body of the prayer.
Sure.
And I remember that I was probably 12 or 14 years old.
Sure.
But I've kind of tried to remember those things.
Sure.
As you build a prayer.
Absolutely. And that organization and that attempt to pattern a prayer, you might say, well, I can't do that. I'm not very good at that. Well, think about other examples and cases where we do that. Because if we're going to go talk to our boss about something, or we know our boss is going to talk to us about something, or we're about to have some kind of serious conversation with our children, we may not be very comfortable to off the cuff just say it, but we're going to at least, because it's important to us, figure out a way to formulate what it is we're trying to say when it matters to us. And so it's possible to be done. It may not come easy, But, and I wanted to emphasize this, and hopefully we'll do this throughout the class as well. What things in our life have we been able to do extremely well the first time we ever did it?
Very few.
I mean, Hannah can tell you right now, I mean, it certainly isn't 9 years before a man has made a good husband. It takes a long time. Must take about 50 maybe. Maybe by the time you get around 50, you finally start
You
getting.
can ask him that. Mine's just 40, but I didn't comment.
Yeah, right. And then, I mean, think about riding a bike. I mean, it takes a long time to learn how to ride a bike before you finally start getting used to it. Well, same thing is the case with leadership. So, brethren, I enjoyed it very much, and I look forward to continuing this. And hopefully, as time goes on, and we hopefully get some folks participating, we can start to challenge ourselves to lead in different ways. And I'd like to even maybe lead singing and these other kinds of things to just because some of y'all know things about singing, for example, that would help me. So hopefully, over time, this will morph into less me leading and us kind of taking different roles and being able to lead and carry this class throughout. All right.
Yeah, I've already learned something, as far as like Ron said, when I got up to lead prayer, I led prayer like I do at home, when I'm praying to God at home. And I didn't basically have a outline.
Sure,
You
right.
know, but, so I need to start doing that, so, yeah.
Yeah.
Many times after I've said prayer, as soon as I get done and sit down or whatever, I forgot that.
Yeah, right. Oh,
Yeah,
I know what that's about.
That's the hardest.
Sure.
One thing I
Forget
want to say,
something.
let's please try to, 'cause a lot of people is not here, need to be here. Let's try to do our best to encourage them.
Yes.
If 3 or 4 or 5 of us hit the same person up to come next time, maybe they start taking a hold on them.
Well, there's a couple of people out of town tonight, and that's why we're doing the video, you know, because I was requesting the video of this
Oh, really?
for Tom specifically.
yeah,
Maybe to help Shad out too, I don't know.
yeah.
Sure. Well, hopefully we'll get better participation. Let's just keep encouraging. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, get up now. You got it down there.
Pick up the raisins, big eyes.
Please,
Well, you know what? Did I already tell you, I was